Good morning, everyone. As I said, my name is Mike Depew with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission out of their Southwest Region office in Somerset. And I'm going to talk today about channel and flathead catfish primarily, and a little bit about white catfish in the Ohio River Basin. And give you a little bit of background about catfish management in Pennsylvania. Back about 10, 11 years ago, we started out working on a plan for managing catfish in PA. Before then, we had very little data on the different species throughout the state. So when the plan was first beginning to get drafted by myself and my former boss, he asked me to do a literature review and as well as gather information on catfish in the state. And you'd think that would be a little tough, but it took about an hour because there really wasn't any literature. There really wasn't anything out there until around 2010, 2011. So we drafted a strategic management plan, and we looked at ways that we can improve catfishing in the state, from determining where our gaps in knowledge are. There are lots of them out there. And as well as managing our invasive catfish. We have a big flathead population now in the Susquehanna River and in the Delaware River Basin, the Schuylkill River. And catfish angling has increased throughout the state in the recent years. A lot of it is probably attributable to the recent increases in the flathead population. So we want to get a handle now on what some of our growth parameters and everything like that is. So with the strategic plan, we basically directed biologists throughout the state to conduct studies on spawning box work, whether that can sustain some of our channel catfish fisheries. We did a bunch of size of stocking work where we're stocking yearlings and fingerlings. We're trying different angler recruitment programs to bring in different anglers to catfishing. Right now we have about 13% of our anglers in the state fish for catfish. Being that from Pennsylvania, most of our anglers are trout fishermen, so I'd be more fitting in at a trout conference, I'd say, than the catfish one. But one of the other things we are looking at was age and growth, and that's the focus of my talk for today. So our study area was the Ohio River Basin. It covers the western third of Pennsylvania. We looked at 5 different lakes, ranging from Pymatuning Reservoir in the northwest, all the way down to Lake Somerset here in the southeastern corner. We also looked at the 3 river system. Pittsburgh's right there in the middle where the Allegheny, Ohio, and the Monongahela come together. Those 3 rivers are impounded, navigational. They have lock and dam systems. We also looked at the free-flowing Allegheny River, which is a little bit farther north. That is obviously free-flowing. So a little bit more background on some of our study area. The 5 reservoirs that we looked at range from about 100 hectares to 5,600 hectares. These all contain channel catfish only, with the exception of the yellow one, Loyalhanna Lake. That one also contains a non-native population of white catfish. We typically studied each one of these waters one time, with the exception of Loyalhanna. We were in there multiple years doing surveys for a variety of different species. 4 of these waters, Crooked, Somerset, Loyalhanna, and Mahoning Creek Lake, are all stocked at a rate of about 20 per acre. Pymatuning Reservoir is naturally reproducing channel catfish. Our river systems pretty much are all naturally reproducing both channel and flathead catfish. The one highlighted water is the free-flowing Allegheny. There's only a population of flathead catfish in any numbers up there. And we typically did multiple surveys on each of these rivers different years. So our methods, they varied by location. We had 3 different fisheries management areas doing surveys. We used 4 different types of gear types. Our baited tandem hoop nets, were 1.5-inch mesh, We used our Pennsylvania-style trap nets, which you see here. They're a maze-type net with a 20-millimeter mesh. They're effective at catching fish at pretty much all sizes, down to 50, 75 millimeters. We did experimental gill nets in some of our reservoirs. The methods had to vary because some of the lakes were very steep-sided, and we couldn't effectively fish our hoop nets or trap nets in there, so there was a little bit of variation there. And we also used some low-frequency electrofishing, primarily to target flathead catfish in the river systems. It was very ineffective in Pennsylvania. Basically, we caught maybe 3 to 4 fish per hour, and they're mainly small fish. So maybe a factor of conductivity, or it may also be density dependent. We're not 100% sure now. Each fish was weighed and measured. For the most part, we subsampled fish from one reservoir, Pymatuning, and we removed the otoliths for aging. Did the procedures that Buckmeyer and all reported back in 2002. So statistical methods, basically we generated a lot of the stuff through our resource force portal and did some Excel stuff. The von Bertalange growth curves and our mortality estimates we ran in R, calculated annual mortality. And one of the other things we did was we compared our growth rates in some of our lakes and rivers for the flatheads and channels to the standards that were presented for standard growth in Jackson et al. Paper in 2008. And we also had to pool some of our data, particularly for flathead catfish in the rivers, because we had such low sample sizes in any given year. So channel catfish in our lakes, we aged a total of 501. It was pretty much anywhere close to 100 fish per lake. These fish are extremely long-lived. Over half the sample was over 10 years of age. There was just a talk where a couple minutes ago, the guy didn't get a single fish in a reservoir in Louisiana that was over 8 years of age. We had 90% of our fish in some of our reservoirs that were over 10 years of age. So they're living a long time. One of our waters, Pymatuning, we actually documented some of our first 30-year-old channel catfish and a maximum age of 34. That fish was 17 inches, so it was not growing very well in that. But almost all of our lakes are containing good numbers of individuals, Pymatuning being one of the exceptions, of fish over 750 millimeters, and 700 and 750. One of our samples, Mahoning Creek Lake, almost 25% of the fish we captured were over 700 millimeters. So there's definitely a large number of good quality size individuals in some of our waters. So the yellow line here is the standard presented in Jackson for channel catfish growth. These are von Bertalange growth curves for each of the study waters, as well as the mean lengths at age here. And you can see that there is a large number of fish over 50, or large range of ages in each of these populations. Fish were growing fastest in two of our lakes that had the youngest individuals. These are also pretty productive turbid impoundments with shad populations. Some of the slower growth was experienced in some of the higher density lakes like Pymatuning Reservoir. Mahoning Creek Lake was very interesting. We had a bunch of 11 and 12-year-old fish that were around 700 millimeters, 750 millimeters, and then we had a bunch of 23-year-old fish that were around 500 millimeters. So there seems to be a variation in growth at age with some of these populations. So our length frequency distributions, you can see that it's not all fish in a lot of these waters that are concentrated in the 400 to 500 millimeter length group. We have a wide variety of them, with the exception of Pymatuning where there's a highest density. And you can see down here that there are some quite sizable channel catfish down in many of our populations. That's just one of a handful of a number of fish we picked up from some of our lakes. In our rivers, a little bit different. We got a lot more fish, higher density, higher catch rates in the Three Rivers system. Ages 1 to 25, about 30% of the sample were over 10 years of age. So once again, they are long-lived in these areas. Similar growth between the Three Rivers and the impounded rivers in all years. Once again, a very high variation in length of age with these fish. And we also had a really dominant year class. The 2010 fish were present at about the same rate in our 2017, 2018, and 2019 sampling on the rivers. They comprised about 55 to 60% of the population in each year. So this is a plot of our individual channel catfish lengths of age and the von Bertalanffy growth curves for the Three Rivers. As you can see, the Jackson standard is once again there on top. Fish grow pretty well up to about age 6 or 7, and it would be tough to pick out an individual fish based on its length of age because it's kind of just like a scatter plot of where they could be. We have, age 4 or age 3 fish up to age 24 could be 16 inches in length. Similarly, age 11 and 12 fish could be 400 to 800 millimeters in length. So very few really large fish in the Three Rivers system, but a high concentration of fish in the 400 to 500 millimeter range. You can see here that we have the length frequency versus the number aged, and those dominant age classes really stood out for these populations. Flathead catfish. They're even older, much older than the channels. We captured, we aged 273 and 62 from the free-flowing Allegheny. That's about the number we caught as well. I think we only had a handful more that we couldn't age. Each water body that we looked at, the fish are just very old, 29 years to 45 years on the lower Allegheny River. It wasn't uncommon to pick up 30-year-old fish. They comprised over 10% of the sample that we sampled out there. So, and it was very interesting is that when we started doing the sampling back in 2011, 2012, we were picking up fish that were around 30 to 31, 32. 6 or 7 years later, we're picking up fish that are 37, 38, 39 years old. So it seems like there may have been something where the fish have only recolonized the river. These were very polluted systems 40 years ago. That these may be fish that have recolonized and are still able to survive from that original colonization. Extremely, extremely slow growing. So this is, once again, another plot. The growth standard from Jackson for flathead catfish is the blue line up top. Each one of the little blue dots is an individual flathead. And if you look down in the far left side over there, there's one blue dot, maybe two that are above that growth standard. So every other individual fish was growing below the standard in these Three Rivers. The L infinity, though, is quite high for the von Bertalanffy growth curve for the impounded Three Rivers. And we pulled it for all the Three Rivers because they were essentially the same. The growth curves literally just sat on top of each other when we plotted them here. And it was, I think it was close to 1,225 millimeters. So fish continually grow, unlike the channels that exhibited pretty slow growth after about age 7, kind of flatlined off a little bit. But these guys are consistently growing throughout their lives. It does take about 15 years for a flathead to get up to about 600 millimeters in the Ohio River Basin in western PA. So I didn't have the original photo of this. I figure we all know where the nucleus is on one of these and where the edge is. I think we all have seen enough otoliths. This is just a flathead catfish otolith. I'll give you an idea of what I'm dealing with constantly when we're aging these things. This was a fish that was collected in June 2018. It was a 37-year-old. It was one of probably 10 fish in a hoop net that I think the total age of the hoop net came up to about 300 years old for the 10 fish. So it's pretty impressive what we have out here. So given that we know that the fish are very old, probably get a pretty good idea of what our mortality estimates are looking like. Channel catfish rates, I don't think I've really seen rates as low as 3%. Yeah, that came out to 0%. We ran it multiple ways. We ended up using weighted linear regression. 24% was in the reservoir that had the lowest maximum age. I think it was a reservoir we only had 9-year-old fish. Even so, it's quite a low rate. Flathead, we calculated it for the most recent years on each of the rivers, and once again, you're in the single digits for each of these populations. We have a 50 fish limit on catfish, no minimum size as well, and it's pretty obvious that there's not much going on with angling mortality or any real mortality out there in the three rivers. Last but not least, for those of you who stuck around for the white catfish part, it was kind of an afterthought. Loyalhanna Lake is the one water body where we've studied white catfish. It's one of 2 lakes out in the southwest part of the state that have an introduced population. 1995 or 96, we had a stocking of channel catfish in the lake that inadvertently introduced white catfish. And we didn't pick them up before 95, we didn't pick them up right around 99, but around 2005 we started picking up a few individuals. Went back again in 2014, we got a decent number of white catfish, and then pretty good number, we got around 80 some fish between our 2015 and our 2016 sampling. As with channels and flatheads out in the southwest, these guys, in southwest PA, these guys live a long time as well. Some of these fish here were up to 20 years of age. I don't know if there's been many white catfish populations that have been documented that old. They also ranged had a very low mortality. We calculated that at about 5%. What it's telling me is that there's not a lot of anglers harvesting catfish in Pennsylvania for any particular species. So, in summary, we do have extreme longevity here in Pennsylvania's Ohio River Basin. We had fish ranging up to 34, 45, and 20 years old. I believe these are the maximum recorded ages for the first 2 species. I'm not sure about the white catfish. There's variable growth in our channel catfish. We had some populations that grew fairly quickly, exceeded some growth standards. Flathead catfish, on the other hand, very slow growth in all the water bodies. Size structure, channel catfish populations was variable. In the rivers, we typically see fish concentrated in those 350, 400, 450 to 500 millimeter size classes. The lake populations growing a little bit better, getting some larger size individuals. It's not to say there aren't some trophies out there. We picked up fish up to 25 pounds, channels at least as well. And very low total annual mortality in these populations. With that, future work in Pennsylvania, this was some of our initial work in the state. We're going to continue to assess waters on a statewide basis. We have a lot more waters that we stock. We have native populations. We'd like to do this work throughout the entire state, and it's ongoing. When that comes, we're going to collaborate. We're going to pull all our data together and rewrite our management plan for the state. We're also going to be implementing some standard protocols so that we can align with some of the other states in the Ohio River, at least in the Ohio River Basin. One thing that we are lacking in is creel survey data. We don't have any work in the last 20-some years, so we're hoping to get a handle, maybe a little bit more, and really confirm that our anglers aren't harvesting these catfish at all. So we're hoping to do a tentative creel survey in 2022. I put a population estimate on there. It would be a nice thing to be able to check out or try in one of our impounded stretches of the three rivers. The dams act as barriers and kind of regulate a certain section of the river. So it would be a good way for us to potentially get a handle on the abundance of some of our trophy catfish in a particular pool, just to see maybe there's population isn't that high, especially just being catch and released over and over. The other last thing we plan on doing is evaluating blue catfish presence. So, blue catfish are native to Pennsylvania. They've been restocked in the pool just downriver from the state. And we're going to hopefully go out there here in the next few years and see if we can't find some and potentially reestablish blue catfish. So with that, just want to acknowledge that our funding was from the Federal Aid and Sport Fish Restoration Act. I'd like to thank all our assistants, our biologist aides, and our interns for helping out and doing all the field work. Also, our former area fisheries manager, Rick Lorson, was one of the driving forces in getting catfish management come a little bit more to the forefront in PA. And one last person, I want to acknowledge one of my co-authors for doing a lot of the statistics, Jeff Smith. He's really helped me out a lot on this stuff here. That part, I'll open it up to any questions.